Okay. Hello, friends. Welcome back. Happy New Year and hope that you all had wonderful holidays. I am Dr. Surya Ganduri, your host for this weekly internet radio show on developing leadership through self awareness, a series of talks using the knowledge from the principles of quantum physics and wisdom of beliefs. These radio talk shows are part of the Quantum Leap radio presentations, where I invite celebrated mentors from around the world to share with us on how to thrive and empower ourselves in this evolving world. And this special feature is presented in a unique monthly roundtable live discussion on every third Saturday of the month. On the remaining Saturdays, you can listen to the weekly regular radio talks at 8 o'clock in the evening, Chicago time. Let me now introduce the panel members joining me here tonight in this monthly roundtable live discussion. Lynn Severson from Colorado Springs. Lynn is an entrepreneur and has a few businesses that she operates. An award-winning inventor and an interior designer. Lynn is a regular panel member on these roundtable discussions. And Charles Prabhakar from Chicago, who is a good friend of mine. We were colleagues at a big corporation where we both worked for some time. And he is currently a managing director of a consulting company. Charles is our go-to expert on these roundtable discussions. Also joining us tonight in the latter half of the presentation, it would be Armand Gabriele, who lives near Atlanta, Georgia. Today is his son's birthday and they're having a party, so he will be joining 1 hour later. And Armand is originally from Brooklyn, New York, although he is originally specifically from Barbados in the Caribbean. Armand is a health and lifestyle coach and consultant for numerous medical practices and individual clients. And he's also the founder of a mentoring program called Guided Man, scheduled to launch this month. So we should actually ask him about this program. Anyway, welcome to Lynn and Charles. Both of you are now on the air. Please say hello to each other and also feel free to add anything else that our audiences would like to hear or know more about you.
Happy New Year, Charles. It's good to be on the show. I missed last month, but looking forward to this ethical conversation we're going to have.
Oh, yeah, I'm very good. Thanks. Happy New Year to Lynn. I'm looking forward to it. I'm glad you're back.
Thank you.
All right. Excellent. Okay. Now, let me set the stage for this discussion tonight. Last month, following on our roundtable discussion, which was focused on the servant leadership, I did another radio talk on ethical leadership. After the broadcast of that show, Armand commented, and I quote, "Ethical leadership is a very important and relative topic when you look at recent events in our society. This is discussion that could last for hours as many of our current leaders operate almost completely void of ethics." That comment resonated well with us, so we decided that we will do a full roundtable discussion by extending our earlier conversation on the servant leadership, but from a perspective of ethics, trust, and collaboration, as opposed to competition, ideology, and ego. That is power, authority, and politics. The servant leader philosophy encourages caring, empowerment, ethics, and trust within the culture of an organization. The fundamental premise is that an individual first chooses to be of service, then leadership is chosen as the means to be of service. And it includes a commitment to community and shared decision making. It emphasizes collaboration, trust, empathy, and the ethical use of power. In my experience as a leader and in working with other leaders, I believe this is a tremendously potent leadership model. The best leaders I know are guided by these values and principles. One of the most demanding aspects of leadership is the relentless stream of changing circumstances, what Charles here calls it situational leadership. This makes it imperative for leaders to find an internal guiding light of purpose and perspective within themselves. The concept of servant leader can provide some of that perspective. And in this model, leaders are seen as stewards of their organization's resources, whether they are human resources or financial resources or material resources. And as we all discussed last month, servant leaders are guided by a genuine concern for the well being of their employees or followers and seek ways to develop and encourage their skills, their effectiveness, and look for ways for their followers to participate appropriately in the organization's decision making processes. Customers are honored and valued as individuals worthy of care, concern, and quality goods and services. Servant leaders see their organization as woven into the fabric of their communities as active and contributing members of the larger whole. So tonight, I would like us to discuss and answer a few fundamental questions like is practicing servant leadership an ethical exercise in itself? Are there differences between ethical leadership and servant leadership? Is there such a thing that we can call ethical leadership? So with that, I would like to bring my guests on the air to set the stage on how they would like to frame their point of view. And then we will deal with each of these questions individually after this introduction is complete. So, Lynn and Charles.
Well, sure. I'll start out with a couple of ideas here.
Sure.
I think of a large, let's say you have a large business that has many, maybe 5 or 6 sections that are all in the same, they all have the same purpose. Mm-hmm. However, they're all treated individually. They're allowed to be, there's a word for it, I'm sorry, it's escaping me, but autonomous, maybe they can do their own thing, but then at the end of the day, they have to come up to a certain level of standards. And they're kind of given more freedom than to operate, and sometimes that privilege is abused when they maybe have, and maybe there are some, or there should be, in my opinion, some guidelines of being a part of that particular business that they have to follow to be a part of the organization. Mm-hmm. But let's say they don't follow that, and they become somewhat of a position in power amongst their, let's say there are five different parts of the thing, and let's say 3 of the people out of the 5 get out of line and they think they can have the power over everything, and they do not do ethical things. You know, how would you, and I'm thinking obviously employee manuals and things like that, and employee rules, but how would you guide your, let's say you're the customer and you're not receiving the service that you would want because these three people have become too powerful and they've chosen to ignore some of the ethical guidelines that you have set up regarding the things you mentioned, the empathy and the trust and collaboration, possibly for it being a leader of the section that they're at, but they don't have any of these qualities in their personality, so they don't tend to use them. And I see that as a big stumbling block when you get such big corporations that everybody should follow the same set of guidelines, but it doesn't seem that that's done. And I don't know how you feel about that.
Okay. Charles?
That's a good point. I think good opening point, I think, Len. So definitely, I think hopefully we can address some of those challenges. I'm sure we've all seen this as part of our corporate and consulting lives, right? We run into those pockets of ethical compromises. I think that's what I think Lynn is alluding to.
Yeah.
And I think maybe I think to Lynn, to your point, before getting into that thing, I think some kind of a context, historically, I think would be kind of helpful within the context of the thing. Surya's introduction. What I thought was, I think, with leadership being one of the interesting topics we have addressed in a lot of different shows. I thought maybe it'll be kind of helpful for the benefit of our audiences, just to kind of set the stage of the discussions we had in the past within the context of servant leadership. Maybe even not even just servant leadership, the whole overall leadership framework. And then I thought maybe it would be helpful to kind of place the whole so-called ethical leadership and servant leadership, and then come back and apply that framework and see, how people kind of align or misalign or compromise those ethical guidelines, which probably might kind of answer Lynn's point. I think that's an important point. I think I'm sure we can talk about a little bit of some of the real world examples to sort of see, kind of substantiate why people do that. Hopefully that might resonate a little bit better with the audience.
Okay. Yeah.
I think, to your point, I think, sorry, and Lynn. So bear with me for a little bit. I think a little bit of context. I'm sure we all talked a lot, right? So in the past, for example, I think we've talked about servant leadership and also in the leadership within the context of, I'm sure, maybe I'm a little biased, right? Some of the audiences will read some of our articles in the larger umbrella virtual ocean strategy. I think with all this one message, I think you've hammered it on and on again is the following, right? So strategy is a value creator, innovation is a value accelerator, and leadership is a value enabler. I think that's a key message. I think that's one of the reasons we kind of created an integrated framework.
Yeah.
So, and then with our show, I think Surya is being quantum physics focused. We have always equated value to the energy management principles. So if that's the case, I think, as much as leadership is value enabler, I would even say leadership is more of an energy enabler for the context of today's discussion. I think that may be a little better kind of a definition within this context. So if you go with that kind of a framing, I think, if leadership is all about energy enablement. So I'm going to kind of set the stage a little bit within the context of one framework. I think maybe I tweeted it last week, kind of reframing, readjusting one of that framework within the context of today's discussion, and then kind of say where ethical leadership and servant leadership fits within that framework, and then come back and answer Lynn's question. So hopefully that will, again, I'm sure that's the same kind of question I think even Surya was alluding to. So for example, I think if leadership is going to be energy enablement, I think one of the things I think a lot of the people say can be also seen discussion definitions like energetic leader. There are so many definitions for leadership, but there is one thing if at all we have seen is leadership is either a lot of people define it as a means-focused leadership, which is more characteristics like ethical leadership or integrity, honesty. You name it, all the different characteristics focused leadership. Or some of the people will be kind of defining it more of an outcome or end-focused leadership, right? This is all about decision, getting things done, or outcome, right? So, rightfully so, there is a place and time for all of those types of definitions. So one of the things I think when we took an approach from an umbrella, from a virtual ocean strategy standpoint, we took it as a mended end decision making framework. In other words, it is kind of a combination of both means and end within the context of overall energy enablement process. What do we mean by that? So just to kind of, those are the audiences, I'm sure you've read our articles on Surya and Lynn, you've also previewed to this. For example, we have always defined leadership as a kind of a sweet spot of amalgamation of what we call the heartbeat energies and then mindset energies, and then how they amalgamate, by releasing the right dose for the right moment, depending upon the context. To your point, that's what we kind of call the situational leadership.
Yeah.
So, which we kind of, I think we go with that kind of energy enablement definition, right? So, what we thought as part of that thing, we kind of put together a framework just recently. It's not the recent framework. We kind of tweaked it based on the research we've done for the last 2-3 years. Was we kind of try to plot the heartbeat energies in the x-axis and then mindset energies in the y-axis. So, and then when you kind of do the plotting, I'm sure a lot of this framework is a very simple framework and resonates with a lot of audiences. Obviously, we kind of get the 5 different quadrants, right? I think, and then you do low, high, you kind of get the 5 different quadrants, the middle 5th quadrant being the central quadrant going close across all the 4. So again, just to take a minute, and then I'm going to quickly come back to the point. So if you see that for the benefit of a easy understanding, what we did was we kind of combined all the heartbeat energies, and then we named the composite energy trait called authenticity. So which kind of goes back to all the ethical related traits or characteristics someone or leaders have to exhibit. In our opinion, all of them can be summarized or synthesized in a attribute called a characteristic called authenticity.
Mm-hmm.
Similarly, that was we plotted an x-axis, and then we kind of combined all of the mindset energies, which is more of an outcome-oriented characteristics. We kind of combined them and called them as accountability. So when we kind of did that, we kind of had the 5 different quadrants. So very quickly, without going into a lot of the details, I'm going to kind of name the 5 different quadrants and then come back and place ethical leadership and then servant leadership in the respective quadrants. That will probably help us to answer the question that Lynn was writing at the beginning of the section. So just bear with me a couple of minutes. So if you look at the lower left quadrant, I think this is what we kind of call the emotional followers quadrant. And then also for the better explanation standpoint, we also kind of assigned a kind of a character to that quadrant. We kind of assigned the sheep quadrant. So, and again, I got out later, if there's some time permitting, I'll come back and explain this quadrant of the story. This is a kind of which is around this sheep, right? How the behavior of the sheep and how that aligns with this quadrant. And similarly, in the lower right quadrant, we kind of call that as more of a savvy servant. I think this is where I think a lot of the servant leadership and ethical leadership fits in, but then I'm going to come back and talk about where do they differ slightly based upon the lenses we are going to look at the quadrant. I'm going to come back and talk about this. So for the easy understanding, we kind of named this quadrant as the elephant quadrant. Again, I got a little bit of a story and also a little bit of a metaphor to explain why I chose to call that as an elephant quadrant. And then similarly, upper left quadrant, we kind of call that as more of an analytical managers. So we kind of named the thing as a dog quadrant. And then also I got a little bit of a story, come back and explain about that. And then the upper right quadrant, we kind of call that as a purpose leader. We assigned the eagle as a kind of a character for that quadrant. And then when you look at the amalgamation of all the different 4 quadrants in the middle, we kind of call that as I think those of the audiences who have seen the picture last week. We kind of call it mentored end leaders. So I was searching for the right character for this. I think the best one I could come close to was I think the Darwin Circle. Again, I got a little bit of story, but then I will let both the Victoria and Lynn chime in if you got to treat that. I'm not 100% sure there's the right kind of representation. Having said that, I think most audiences can also relate to now visualize these 5 different quadrants. So now, I think the next thing I'm going to do is, I think when we looked at work, the next exercise, we try to do this framework, we try to look at from the 3 different lenses. I think that's what I think I'm going to come back to the point where servant leadership and ethical leadership fits in, and then we can kind of compare and contrast, which is, I think, probably, so to your point, I think this probably is also going to answer your first question. So for example, I think when you look at this framework with the style lens, I think this is what I think, and I kind of call it, when I mean by style, this is what I call, when I say style, it is basically the amount of heartbeat energy and mindset energy leaders usually they release within a given context or a situation. That's what I mean by style. When you look at that with that style lens, in the first quadrant, I think the sheep quadrant, I think we can definitely call them as more of a kind of a service leaders, whereas the elephant quadrant, which is when you look at it from the style standpoint, they are more of a, I kind of call them as a means or ethical leaders. And then the third quadrant, the dark quadrant, it is more of a, I kind of call them the outcome leaders. And then the fourth, I think, eagle quadrant, they call more of a decision leaders. And then in the middle quadrant, there's going to be balance leaders. Similarly, when you look at the same thing from, I kind of call the career stage lens, I think the definition I'm going to use this here is, I think the amount of heartbeat energy and mindset energy leaders are capable of releasing, which means they have maximum potential. This lens, again, kind of fits into the same type of a side quadrant. When you look at it from this lens, the sheep quadrant, they are more of a kind of a service or order taking type of leaders, whereas the elephant quadrant, they are called, I think, servant leaders. And then this is where the point is when you again, I think the purpose of we are going to spend a lot of time on the second quadrant, right? This is where the point again I want to make you stress the point here is when you look at this framework from a style lens, they are more of ethical leaders. When you look at it from a more of a kind of a career stage lens, they are more servant leaders. And then when you look at it from the third lens, which we kind of call as the value lens, which fits into a virtual ocean strategy, then they become human capital of thought leaders. So hopefully that kind of, I think that's the message I'm going to talk about it. Again, I don't want to spend a lot of time on talking about the third and fourth quadrant, although if there's time left in this next section, we can always come back and explain with some of the stories. Hopefully that will resonate with our audience. Again, to set the stage, I think hopefully that so far, I think it has resonated with our audience. I'm not going to go on and on, but I think the point again is the key message here is when you look at the second quadrant, the elephant quadrant, when you look at it from the style lens, it's more of an ethical leadership quadrant. When you look at it from a career stage lens, it is more of a servant leadership quadrant. So in other words, they're two sides of the same coin, and then depending upon which is more important within the context, I think to Lynn's point, I think someone becomes more powerful and they meet their numbers, they meet their performance, then they tend to compromise. I think then leaders, the senior leaders have given emphasis to the more of the kind of the ethical part of the leadership, and then that quadrant takes the leadership style of that, and then that gets important. So hopefully that's kind of sets the stage. Now again, so depending upon how you want to shape this conversation, again we can go now maybe a little bit into the context detail, why those behaviors happen. And again, we can also talk about a little bit about case studies or examples of, from our past experiences. And again, depending upon, I'll let you shape the conversation. If you want me to address some of that as examples, I can go with that, or I'll let maybe, Lynn to chime in a little bit to clarify. Again, either way. So I just want to kind of pause for a moment here, and then I'll let you both kind of shape the conversation, and then we can go from there.
Excellent. Very good. Yeah. We will be talking about the various styles and behavior. Yeah. So that would be very, very, very helpful. So let's start with the first question. Is practicing servant leadership an ethical exercise in itself? In other words, what are the ethical implications for the servant leadership style and other relational leadership styles that Charles was talking about? But what do I mean by when I say style? The style of leadership in a business has a significant impact on the productivity and culture of the workplace. No two leaders are exactly alike, though there are some characteristics they may share. Servant and relational leaders share the same broad focus on employees and customers that transcends business profits and productivity. However, there are differences to both leadership styles that affect the way in which leaders interact with employees and customers. A servant leader tends to focus on the ethical interactions a business has with employees and the outside world. Relational leaders typically focus on the relationships between the employees. So, ethical standards are important to all businesses, no matter what type of leaders they employ. However, servant leaders typically go beyond generally accepted ethical principles and consider the broad implications of their business practices. For example, a business might produce carbon emissions within the limits set forth by the EPA, the Environmental Protection Agency, here in this country. However, a servant leader would consider the long-term impact of current pollution emissions from their company and take steps to change the operations. On the other hand, relational leaders are not typically concerned with the overall well-being of the society or community beyond ethical norms. So, having defined the terms, now let me turn this over the center of stage to Charles and Lynn. Maybe Lynn wants to go first, and then Charles will join.
Well, I guess my feeling is I'm not understanding this probably as well as I can, but um, I don't understand some of the terms you're using because I don't have that leadership experience that you do. But it sounds to me like you're indicating that different types of leadership will bring different results and responses from people. And I guess I would have to say, if you're going to be a leader and you're going to be in a servant situation, then everybody in that particular organization, if it's all for servants, should be acting the same way. If it's some other kind of leadership, they should be acting in a different manner, depending on what type of organization it is. For example, a manufacturing plant versus a service situation, like say a health service situation or something like that. I mean, the customer's always right and I know this is going a little off course, but the customer's always right is one of my favorite things. And the customer may be somebody who can't speak for themselves, or it may be somebody who's, like a young child or an elderly person or something like that, if it's a health situation. So you need to have somebody else speak for them, but they are still the bottom line, and they are the ones that are paying everybody's salary. And so I think that has to be treated in a different situation than if you're manufacturing something. And then in that case, the product needs to be the servant and the buyer. So, I'm seeing a little confusion depending on which kind of a leadership situation you have, depending on what kind of an industry you're in. And I don't know if it's because I didn't understand everything you guys went through, or if it's just that I've opened up another can of worms.
No. You're not confused, but you are mainly talking because you are a servant leader. So your perspective is always that. And just like you said, in your world, you feel that the customer is always right. But from other leadership points of view or perspective, not every leader thinks that way. That's exactly what we are discussing. I think Charles will be elaborating more on that. Charles?
Okay, that sounds great.
Okay.
Yeah, that's a good point. I think, exactly right, Glenn. I think, if I had to paraphrase, I think, Lynn, to your point, you're saying if someone is a certain leader, you got to be, it's expected of him to be ethical. So in other words, I think you're positioning from this career stage, Glenn. So if you're saying if someone is kind of capable of being a servant leader, that means, he's capable of his potential is so much, that means he has to always meet that expectations. So in other words, if I have to explain, I think, to linear point, it is the leaders versus born versus made, right? Most of the consensus is both born and made. So in my mind, when they're out of the box, when someone is out of school or kind of an early stage in their career, they are by themselves, most of the people are ethical, right? But the values they are born with, their families, the society. So but at the same time, when they come into a corporation, a business setup, they come with their values and they try to align their values with the values of a corporation, and then they try to release certain amount of heartbeat energies and mindset energies to meet that need. This is what I kind of call it. So what they usually do out of the box in a given a situation, we kind of call them as ethical leaders.
Mm-hmm.
Same time, when you look at from the other lens, what they can, what they are capable, what their maximum potential, that's what is expected of it. That's what your point. So that when you're whatever they're capable of, they exhibit the highest level of standards, so they're the highest level of heartbeat energies, highest level of mindset energies, then they become servant leaders. So the point is, you're saying, when someone is a servant leader, they are supposed to be expected to behave highly ethical. Yes, but the reality is, that means people have to train from themselves, or leaders have to train themselves to exhibit to reach their maximum potential. See, that potential can keep on going in every iteration. So the point again I'm saying is, so that means leaders can be trained to be a lot more ethical, a lot more, I think that kind of goes back to Surya's point. February as long as they meet their carbon emission standards, they're still ethical.
Mm-hmm.
But then the civil leaders, they go the extra mile and they look at the big picture, okay, what are the things I got to do from the largest community, largest country, and even from a global standpoint. And then some of the civil leaders, they even go one more level. Say, you know what? Just me saying that companies have to practice is not good enough. They will even come up with some kind of a business model which will motivate customers, companies, and businesses, communities to collaborate in such a way that the end result of that collaboration will motivate the people to be a lot more ethically relevant within the carbon emission standpoint, environmental sustainability standpoint. So they will even go to the extent of even coming with a new type of business model, which will behind the scenes will motivate the companies to be more socially relevant.
Yeah.
So the point is that the potential keeps on increasing based upon the training. That's what I kind of call the career stage. So in other words, I think the servant leadership career stage, when you're looking at from the standpoint, servant leadership doesn't stop when you look at from the quadrant 2 or the elephant quadrant. Even when they go to the quadrant 3, 4, that's still there. Every leadership style is building on each other. So every iteration, every experience, every lifestyle experience, every time you learn, you keep on exhibiting, releasing more and more energy. Your potential keeps going up. Then it all becomes all-inclusive type of leadership style. So which kind of goes back to your point. I think that means when someone is by nature, if they are civil leaders, that means they are already operating in the higher potential energy enablement level. That means by default, they're covering the minimal need style needed by the ethical standards of that leadership style. So in other words, the point again is, if they are civil leaders, by default, they are already the super set. At the same time, if someone is just going to exhibit a leadership style just to tick the mark, okay, I got to do this, then there comes a stressful situation. Those are the leaders, when it's a stressful situation, they are not live up to the moment, then they try to cut corners or they try to compromise at the cost of meeting the numbers but in a different area. So the point again is, I think, this is what I think the 3 different lenses, it's very helpful is, every leaders have to do a kind of a self-awareness, a self-realization. Obviously, Surya talks about, leadership are all about self-awareness. Right from the get-go, when you go into a new job, a new position, they got to have a self-awareness. Where do they stack up? Where do they, within the quadrant, where do they fall? What is the amount of energy they are capable of releasing versus what they're releasing today? So it's kind of the liver, I kind of call the energy livers. So, and then, as long as you are striving towards releasing your highest potential energy, you are well prepared to handle any type of stressful situation, whatever it comes across your way. So the point again is, this is where your leadership coaching, training, mentoring, all of that is going to help you to go from, kind of a glory to glory type of a thing, going from energy to energy. So you are all covered from all the different quadrant standpoints. Hopefully that kind of, I think, lends you kind of to an extent answers your point. But again, the point is, you're right. I think the question you're answering was, you're someone is, their style is that, and then they're put in a stressful situation, they cut corners, right? So that means the answer is, they got to be subjecting themselves to be coached, and they got to go through the mentoring session. That's again part of the emphasis. We've been always, leadership is always can be also, they're born, but also they can be taught. Right? So that's kind of the message, right? So I think, once you go from out of the box leadership, more of the minimal ethical leadership style, and then when you go from level to level, go from the extra mile, then you kind of exhibit your servant leadership style, which is more of a super set type of a leadership style, which covers both. I think think hopefully that kind of answers Lynn's point. And also, again, I'm sure the same type of analogy can also be talked about when you go into different quadrants. The same type of paradigms applies to every one of those quadrants. I think that's where I think this framework, when you look at it, when you look at it from the multiple lenses, every lens gives you different insight, and every insight is a learning opportunity. Because at the end of the day, leaders, there's no, the end of the day, there's no one can say that they have reached the pinnacle of leadership. Leadership is always an opportunity for learning. So that's what sometimes people call the lifelong learning. So hopefully, that resonates with the audience. And again, also looking into your point, hopefully that is clarified. Again, I'd like to hear again, there's no one size fit all answer, right? This is one of those nebulous topics you can kind of brainstorm and learn from each other. Again, I'll let you kind of chime in a little bit more and clarify.
Yeah, why don't you go ahead and talk a little bit more about the other relational leaderships in the styles?
Yeah, sure. Again, I think that's what I think. There's some time left. That's what I was thinking. Again, I think the different quadrants, right? I think I was kind of thinking this afternoon about. I think the character assignment I did. I think that kind of made me, because I learned a lot when I was trying to do this, because in a way the framework is being shaped as you speak, kind of a thing, right? So, so I think to your point, maybe there's some time if there's an interest. I think I thought the way I was saying was I was trying to assign for every quadrant an animal character, and also a key discernment question, and also a story. So those are the three kind of, I always like the three-dimensional kind of learning, right? So for every three different lenses, I thought, if you assign every quadrant, those kind of the character, a key discernment question, and also kind of a story, which kind of probably throws an insight in every one of those quadrants. Again, maybe if that's what I think you want to go a little bit deeper, I'll be glad to do that.
Yeah, so actually, because in
I think so.
Because
I think let's start then from the beginning. The first quadrant we talked about, the sheep quadrant, right? Again, this is the quadrant which is mostly the out of the box, I think, the early type of leaders. Again, there's no, although I kind of call them kind of the emotional followers, or maybe the better name is like shepherds, right?
Yeah.
So again, most of the leaders in this style, I think, from a style lens, you can call them as order-taking leaders, and from a stage lens, we kind of call them service leaders. These are the people who are in their customer services and experiences. And then from a more of a capital, from a value lens, we kind of call them as a customer capital. I think this is one of the capitals if you look at those audiences that's been virtualization strategy. I think, remember we always talked about this is a type of capital. So we kind of call them customer capital leaders. So the character I picked here was kind of the sheep because, sheep is one of the most innocent, kind of animal, right? I think, I'm sure a lot of the story I like is what the story part is, I'm going to talk about the sheep and pig story, right? This is a story we all have heard a lot. This is also scientifically they have proven this. The research is proven, right? So, for example, when the flock of sheep comes through an area, passes by an area, you put a stick in front of the flock. The first sheep will jump, the second will jump, and third will jump, and even then, at the first one when it comes, even if you take the stick out, the exact place the fourth one will jump and the fifth one will jump. So, in other words, they are more of the blind followers type of a people, right? And then there is a context sometimes we need those kind of people. At the same time, the lesson here is, I think, you got to be, there's a place to take orders. At the same time, here is we got to avoid the trap of blindly following someone. So that's kind of the lesson I was trying to do. In other words, the discernment question here is the blind followers versus smart followers. So that's an important discernment question everybody has to be answering. And then also another story is, I think at the end of the day, also leaders in this quadrant, also I think, this is another scriptural story. At the end of the day, discerning the sheep from the goats, right? So this is kind of thing, maybe to an extent, you can also, the blind followers with the smart followers. I think that is also kind of the story which will resonate a little bit with our audience. So that's kind of the way I was looking at this quadrant. Again, this is the hypothesis in the story, as we speak, it was evolving. When it comes to the second quadrant, which is the focus of the discussion today, I think this is a kind of a interesting quadrant. I think I assigned it was the elephant, right? This there's a little bit of historical context to this or a metaphor, right? So people kind of call the elephant in the room, right? So this is a quadrant, this by, when you look at it from a kind of a style lens, we kind of call them as ethical leaders. From a career stage lens, we kind of call them servant leaders. From a value lens, we kind of call them human capital thought leaders. So when you look at those in the elephant, right? So the key discernment question here is expected versus unexpected. So they got to be discerning the expected events of these leaders. I mean, that is normal, right? That's what the people call, the elephant in the room. Same thing. There's another thing was also shouldn't be missing of unexpected, which is sometimes people call the white elephant in the room.
Mm-hmm.
So the story I was doing was there was an interesting book from the Arjuna, the White Elephant. This is an interesting book. I think I've not read the book. I read the summary of the book, which draws a lot of inspiration from Mahabharata, and also it is kind of applicable to the 21st century. This is I think if I find time I'll read it. So again, this is about a white elephant. A person. The story goes. I think the character name is Mike. I forgot the last name. So he goes to India in the city of Pune, and without an unexpected way, he inherits a white elephant by the name Arjuna as part of his inheritance,
Mm-hmm.
which is totally unexpected. So by the time so it was written in his uncle's will, and he inherits that. And by the time when he decides to leave India to come back to America, he was not sure how he's going to bring this white elephant back to U.S.
Mm-hmm.
Because he's from Maryland, and then although he has got a farm and everything, but he wasn't sure how he was going to do it. So then at that point in time, some of the people will be kind of advising, you can sell it, a lot of different things. I didn't really understand the full because I haven't not read the novel. But the moral of the story is it is basically Mike is going to decide convenience versus duty. So which is a larger theme within the Mahabharata. That's why they named the characters Arjuna.
Mm-hmm.
So this is interesting. So this is a discernment question. When you are faced with unexpected events, how do you tackle this? Your duty versus convenience. There is another also similar story again. Also I read was Mark Twain has another. This is more of a 19th century novel, I believe. A similar type of white elephant, I think, which was there was a king who was presenting a white elephant back to Queen of England, and they were trying to ship the white elephant back to England on the way through the ship. By the time it came to New York and New Jersey, the white elephant got lost. I think, those of you who read the story, maybe, you can relate to it. I think by the moral of the story, by the time they'll find it, it's more of a detective story, right? By the time they'll go in, and then the detectives go and find it about that there are a lot of misinformation being floating about this white elephant, it is destroying a lot of the villages. Because all finally, at the end of the day, all this information, finally they'll come back and find the white elephant was dead because there was nobody to feed him, so he'll die by death of hunger or something along those lines. The point again is the moral of the story was people did not know how to handle unexpected events. That's the moral of the story, same story. Even in good stories, I think the thing is when leaders are faced with, obviously they shouldn't be missing out the elephant in the room. At the same time, which is very, very obvious. At the same time, when they're faced with unexpected events, also they had the right strategy to deal with it. So that's what I thought that story will be resonating with a little bit of our audience.
Okay.
The third quadrant, I think, it's more of analytical managers. I think, when you look at it from the style and their outcome are end-focused leaders, and then career stage they are more transactional leaders, and from a value lens they are more financial capital leaders. So when the character I was kind of the thing was I was assigning was barking dog, right? So the question was not all that barks is always going to bite. So in other words, when you're so analytical, you got to be able to discern, what are the things you're going to go after. If there's a alarm or alert or something, you cannot be dealing with every barking dog because not all their dogs which barks is going to bite. So the story I was struggling with, I think, was the story I was kind of thinking, given we derived a lot of inspiration from scriptures. The first one we got it from the Bible and the second one from Mahabharata. I thought I was trying maybe if there's in any historical context. And then I kind of ran into the story in Prophet Muhammad. I think this is an interesting historical context. I'm going to kind of reframe it a little bit. Apparently, I think I'm not going to spend a lot of time. Hopefully, I think Surya and Lynn, I think I'm kind of going in the right direction. I don't want to kind of go on and on, but are you guys there?
Yeah,
Yeah.
make it.
Okay, so hopefully everything. Okay, let me continue then. So this story, I think, the Prophet Muhammad apparently was giving a prophecy to one of his wives. The prophecy goes like this, right? So when you guys, when those days women were carried by the camels, and then when his wives were carried by the camels, he would be saying, when you passing by the city Tawaf, I think the dogs, there will be people who will be dying in one side, and there will be life threats will be coming from the other side. But when you pass by this city, dogs will be barking. But then, if you just ignore, keep going, you will be safe. But then, when his wife Aisha was hearing this prophecy, she would be laughing. And immediately Prophet Muhammad apparently will turn towards his son-in-law. So she never got the prophecy. She's totally misunderstood. Then he'll come back and tell his son-in-law. So even if that happens, if Aisha makes some stupid decision, you got to discern the things and make sure you don't act on the spur of the moment. So the moral of the story was, I think, that exactly happened. But then when the dog starts barking, the anecdotal story goes in hindsight because both of them reacted stupidly. This is where is what I said is the whole Sunni sect formed because of that decision, and the other sect formed because of the son-in-law's decision. They've been fighting even today. The moral of the story was because they ignored the prophecy, they didn't act or discern the thing correctly, and that's one of the reasons, even until today, those two sects are fighting today. So it's kind of another kind of a thing, the story I thought was good lessons you can learn. One stupid decision, when you overreact, you can make some kind of outrageous kind of a thing which can follow through the ages. Another, I think, anecdotal quote I remember of the Churchill, he says, if you stop throwing stones at every barking dog, you'll never reach your destination. I think that's an interesting quote, I think Churchill's quote. So again, the point again is, when you're in this leadership style, there will be always some false flaws. People out there to distract you. So but then the question is, not all the barking dogs are going to be bite you. So sometimes you got to just ignore and move on.
Mm-hmm.
And again, the fourth one, I'm going to real quickly. This is again, this is an interesting quote, and I think this is what we kind of call them purple leaders, right? So when you look at it from the style lens, they are more decisive leaders. When you look at it from the career stage, they are transformational leaders. And then from a value standpoint, they are more product and services capital leaders. So this is the character I was assigning was ego. I think I've written a lot. I think those are audiences who have seen some of my writings, and if you talk about ego also in the past, but then the key characteristics is basically the discernment question is when to speed up and to slow down, right? So this is again, ego has got a lot of interesting characters. I can go on and on, but one thing I want to say is egos are one bird, I think, it just knows how to fly above the storms. We all know that. But also it knows how to speed up, how to slow down. It knows to renew its strength. I think, another thing, if you look at the lifespan of eagle, you have a phenomenal style for up to his mid-age, and he knows how to renew its leadership style, and then he'll come back and regain its strength. Mm-hmm. So the point again is, it's very great character you can learn from a situational leadership. Again, there's a lot of control precedents and stories about that ego. Okay, so hopefully that's the kind of again thing from the discernment questions, when to speed up, when to slow down. Mm-hmm. So this kind of aligns with the fourth quarter. And the fifth one is again, I kind of call them mended end leaders or mentee leaders. So this is again from a style lens, we kind of call them the balanced C-suite leaders, and then from a career state lens, we kind of call them situational leaders. And then from a value lens, we kind of call them value multiplying leaders. So this is again, I was looking for a character which is a great character, amalgamation of sheep, elephant, dog, and eagle, right? So kind of I wasn't sure. Then the one scriptural story came to mind. This is where Jesus will say, you know what? He will say, as wise as serpent, but as innocent as dove. So this is one example you say how you got to be exhibiting simultaneous characteristics. Again, I don't want to go a lot of the things. Sopan being known for its wisdom and wise and tricky and and all of that at the same time. Dow is a bird which is known for peace and innocence and all of that. So again, leaders, when you're balancing all of those characters, you got to be as wise as serpent and as innocent as cow. So I thought that would be a good character to do this. So again, without going on and on, hopefully all of those different quadrants with a kind of a character, animal character, descendant, question, and story gives us some insights. I'm sure this framework is evolving. I'll be glad to listen your insight and continue to shape it. And eventually, we can kind of publish it as an article or I usually do that as a tweet cluster. But again, I thought I'd just throw it out there. Again, I want, both I think Lynn and Surya, I want to kind of chime in and let's shape the conversation. This is the direction we want to take the conversation to the next level.
That's excellent. Because I wanted to give some framework to the various styles of leadership and how they play out. So now let's look at the second question and focus on the differences between ethical leadership and the servant leadership. So to do that, let me start with an example. And I hope our audiences remember. This is actually something happened. It's a real story that happened a couple of years ago when the SGK Foundation, SGK stands for Susan G. Komen Foundation. And this situation, what happened was that SGK Foundation and KFC, the Kentucky Fried Chicken, they decided to join their forces actually it was last year, early 2014, I believe, to promote breast cancer awareness. And they had commercials touting the pink bucket. $1 would be donated for every pink bucket that was bought at KFC. And it turns out that a lot of people were very unhappy with this union between KFC and the SGK Foundation. And because ethical blogs had been posted everywhere, asking whether or not SGK should have signed up with a company that has cancer-causing agents in their food. The director of the SGK Foundation did ask that KFC focus more on the grilled chicken or the fried chicken. But critics pointed out that grilled chicken was just as bad. And she knew there would be some criticism with that union, with that partnership between KFC and the SGK Foundation, but did not expect the amount of response that came pouring in. And SGK basically said that the ends justify the means, since their main goal was to raise awareness and generate money for the research and education for the breast cancer. And this example shows how virtue ethics can play into a leader's role. Should the company join forces with another company who does not share the same values, or should the company ignore certain shareholders' values to bring in more profits that will end up benefiting the whole? And these are the questions that leaders have to ask themselves. There are two types of ethical theories based on conduct and character of a leader. Consequential or duty-bound ethics, that's one. And the other one is called virtue-based ethics. Consequential or duty-bound ethics rely on a leader's conduct, whereas virtues-based ethics rely on a leader's character. No matter what ethical theory a leader may rely on, there are some principles that all leaders should have as their ethical foundation. For example, number one, respecting others as an end in themselves, not as a means to an end. Number two, serving others where the leader puts their followers' welfare before their own well-being. Number three is fairness. Fairness meaning that they are being fair and just to everyone, not just to a special few. And number four, I can think of honesty. Honesty, where leaders don't need to be completely truthful, but deliver what you promise and take accountability. And the last one, in my opinion, is building a community. Both the leader and the followers are being able to agree on a common goal. And so those attributes seem to be the foundation for not only leaders, but for organizations themselves. As a matter of fact, an organization's culture defines the ethical background. We talked about this in the culture episode. A culture should focus on respect, serving others, justice, honesty, and community. And based on these principles, going back to the example that I just mentioned with the SCK Foundation, SCK chose to ignore the respect of certain stakeholders, justice for the women who had or who have breast cancer, and the cancer community as a whole. The foundation is now struggling to regain the trust of those who lost faith in them. They may have made a lot of money for the foundation in the short run, but probably lost their donation power over the long run. So with that, I would like your thoughts on this question, Lynn and Charles. Are there differences between ethical leadership and servant leadership? It's almost 9 o'clock. Maybe we should try to call Armand and see if he can join us. Maybe Lynn can start talking, and while I dial him out. Does that sound okay?
You want me to talk while you're dialing Armand?
Yes, please, so that
Okay.
there is no there is no gap. Okay.
Okay.
All right.
Are you getting a echo? Anybody, or is it just me?
I think it's just you. I don't have anything. It's perfect.
It's not happening now, so I don't know what it was. Well, and you did want me to talk, right?
Yes.
Okay. I really liked those 5 things that you mentioned, and also, Charles, I liked your animal examples. I thought that was really interesting how you were portrayed a kind of animal or whatever it was, comparing it and putting it in this with how you're dealing with the
Well, when it is on the fly, so hopefully there's a lot of.
I know you do that, but it was good. It was good. I kind of like that sort of stuff, But anyway, back to what Springer was just talking about. I think it also addresses the original premise I brought up about how you get the right leaders to fit into the right slot to do the right job, and if they're good at one thing and they're hired for that particular thing, and then they fail at some of these other really important things, then you've lost the whole battle.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe the war,
Yeah.
So it's a big concern. And I don't know if you would have guidelines that they have to follow, if they're tested on those, or what would happen. I don't know how that would all meld together, but it'd be interesting to try to put your 5 ideas with what Surya just said, and that's just real interesting about. I didn't even realize that about. I saw the Coleman Foundation, and I saw the controversy, but I was otherwise occupied, so I wasn't able to follow it. However, you gotta play by the rules, for heaven's sake. So and do something so obvious and that is so public. It's just amazing to me. But anyway, so that's kind of my thought on what Surya was saying, just about the respecting and serving and the fairness and all that. I think there has to be really seriously good guidelines when somebody's hired, and then they need to go to that. Somebody has to have oversight to make sure they follow those guidelines to make a good business and good leadership. Okay. Surya, where are we?
Yeah, I think Armand joined the discussion. Armand, are you there?
Yes. Good evening. Hi, everyone.
Okay. We are actually discussing the second question, which is, are there differences between ethical leadership and servant leadership? I don't know when you joined while Lynn was talking. So if maybe you hang on until Charles chimes in with his response, and then you can catch up. That sound okay?
Sure, no problem.
Okay, Charles.
Yeah, sure. Welcome, Armand. Welcome to the discussion. So, there you go. All right. So I think to continue, I think, Lynn, to your point, I think, obviously the Corman Foundation, I think, even though, I kind of vaguely remember the story, that story, I put that in the context, right? The question is, does means justify the end, right? Rightfully so, we kind of talked about our leadership style is like an end to end, right? So that means, in other words, there is a balance, right? So the one thing in the ethical leadership style, one thing I've seen is, I think, the question of right versus wrong is always easy to handle in ethical leadership, but the question is versus right versus right? It's one of those dilemmas leaders always face, right? This is the gray line, right? So it sounds to me the example is kind of one of those right versus right, although a lot of case studies have been done with this right versus right? So how do we handle those situations, right? So this is where the kind of a situational leadership fits in. So, but within this context of this case study, then I'll come back and talk about this a little bit more about this right versus right, learn a little bit more. So I think this within the context of this point, I think to Lynn and Surya, that this is one thing I remember right from the get-go. This is what I think. There's an article, I think Jack Welch, I think, is known for his leadership insights. I think the reason there's an article in LinkedIn, he said, he was talking about more of in a personal situation standpoint. Even before you join an organization, one of the acid tests he was suggesting was, if your personal values does not align with the values of an organization, never bother joining that organization.
Yeah.
And then, if you still choose to join the organization, then what you were suggesting was, although he didn't directly allude was, then there comes a moment, organizational values will override your personal values.
Yeah.
So this is one of those. So both are right, I think. But then the guiding principle here is, there is a moment in leaders' lifespan, life cycle. You get a chance to do the first right, and then if you fail to do so in the first right, then you are bound by the second right. So this is kind of I think, same dilemma. In other words, in Corman Foundation, they had a chance to evaluate their values against KFC's values. When they missed the boat, so having missed the boat, having gone so far, maybe they continue to the, I don't know whether which is when they should have taken the right versus right. Maybe they had a chance, they missed the boat, right? So the question again is, hindsight is 2020, right? And you're kind of looking at the story, but I think this is one of the things. So maybe I would say it's a leadership failure. I think they maybe failed in this right versus right acid test. They failed to evaluate. I think in the hindsight is very easy to evaluate it. Maybe they, again, we didn't know all the facts on the table, whether they didn't evaluate it correctly or they misled. All of those things, we don't have crazy cases. The point again is, I think, there will be, maybe the takeaway from here is, in non-career situations, we all will run into this situation. Does the means justify the end? Or are we going to do the right things first or things right? So this is the effective leadership versus efficiency leadership, right? So the point again is, it's always important, you got to choose the right things, right? That's what I think, that's the first right, you got to get it right. But then once you've gone into you've taken the path, then your time and energy, all of that is making more focused on doing things right. So I think, this is where I think it's all timing, but then in every moment, this is where leaders, to your point, I think in your big picture, when you are capable of releasing your heartbeat and mindset energy in the big picture context, you're privy to the kind of one of the eagle type of leaders. You should know how to zoom out and zoom in. So when you're zooming out, you got to see the consequences from a big picture standpoint. So so that you will not miss any of the nodal trees. And then you come back and focus on the right tree to make the right decision. So the point again is, I think this is, if your leaders are not cautious, you will end up sitting in the scenario of this missing the boat on this right versus right. The right versus wrong would be so obvious. So everybody, most of us will get it. Most leaders, now, although there are some few exceptions, but most of the people, it's very obvious they'll get it. But most of the leaders will fail in this right versus right. I think this case study, the story, I think, so you're talking about kind of falls into it. I don't know what the right answer in this situation. If I've been there or what I've done, again, I don't know all the things. I think that to Lynn's point, I think I can empathize. I think so. Maybe they made a wrong kind of a call. Maybe they improved their bottom line, but then they lost the trust. This is for the short term profit versus long term. Right? Maybe because they lost the trust, now maybe they're not able to missing numbers from they lost the credibility.
Yeah.
Now their longer term things are lost. Right. So again, I think the point again is maybe that's a good insight. Right. Right from the get go, you got to align the values. There's a mismatch. That's the opportunity for us to make the first break. Right.
Yeah.
If not, I think if you miss the boat, maybe the pragmatic decision. If somebody has missed the boat, having gone, then maybe you got to continue the flow. I don't know. So again, I'm just throwing out there. There's no right or wrong answer here. Hopefully that kind of answers your question. Also, again, I would like to maybe I think maybe Armand to chime in and then kind of continue the conversation a little bit more.
Yep. Armand?
Since I entered late, I want to make sure I understand the question. Would you mind repeating the question one more time, please?
Yeah, sure. We were discussing whether there are differences and what are the differences between the ethical leadership and servant leadership.
Ethical leadership and
servant.
And what's the other leadership?
Ethical leadership and servant leadership.
Okay.
Armand, this is Lynn. Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
What I was going to say is at the very beginning, I was mentioning a situation where most of the stuff I do is servant leadership. And so that's where this whole thing started with that particular issue was we've been comparing the servant to the rest of the things. So that's where that came from. And that's all I wanted to say.
Oh, no, that's fine. Actually, I love it because the ethical leadership versus servant leadership. And the thing is that I'm in this very quick moment, I'm trying to determine how much can you really separate the two. And I think I don't know if the two can really be separated, because when you're a servant, one thing that comes into play are your ethics. And another word that came to mind is integrity also. In serving, in that selfless approach, your goal is to fulfill the needs of those whom you are serving, even coming from a position of leadership. And with that, the tricky thing is to continue to put others first in what we're doing. And I say that's tricky because we always have that little ego that can accidentally cause us to turn things around, and we start focusing more on ourselves than those who are leading. And I think that's what happens with a lot of individuals, a lot of leaders. We accidentally, I won't say forget ourselves, but forget our purpose and what we are doing. And with that, I would have to even add with servitude, we have to continually take others into account, but still come from a position of what we believe is the right approach. For example, and I'll use this as an example because it is a recent occurrence. Our son, he is in a special program, a magnet program, and he had the choice of two schools to attend. One school is famous for their band. They actually have one of the best bands in our city. And the other school, they're noted for their academics. They're in the top 10 for academics in actually Georgia, not even just our city. So, of course, he wanted to go to the school that had the best band because he's in the band, and most of his friends are going there. He don't want to go to the other schools. So we're as parents, although we are parents, we are serving our children because they can't do anything and we have to care for them. And in this manner, our choice was, do we please him or do we do what we know is best for him? Mm-hmm. And in that case, sometimes even those who you are serving, you have to go against what they say and what they want because you have to do what's best for them. Yeah. So of course he's in a school where the focus is the academics. He's happy now. But these are circumstances that happen in all walks of life where there are leaders and there are those who that they are serving, that we have to make sure, even when disagreeing, that we have to consider what is best for those who we are serving. And we have to forget ourselves, but not neglect ourselves in the process. And in doing so, we have to keep in mind, and that's why I say it's a tricky thing, we have to keep in mind what is best for that individual, what would look good for them. Our son was trying to get us to believe that, our focus is the academics of the school. He would have gotten a scholarship to college or via the band, but as we were explaining to him, that's not the most important thing. It's best to get an academic scholarship. He can still be free to be in a band when he gets to college and so forth. But again, we were faced with, we have to serve him. We have to do what's best for him in spite of what he was thinking and what he wanted. Now, that may be easy to see and there may be clarity because that's a child versus adult. But what happens when you are an adult and you're working with other adults who's supposed to know what's best for them? How do you serve them? What do you do as a leader maintaining servitude, and then even may go against the grain or may cause unpopular decisions to be made? And how do we keep ourselves out of it? The ego can easily come in when we're making constantly good choices that seem to be benefiting all those involved. It's easy to become to feel so good about oneself and the progress that's being made and the good things that's coming out of your leadership that we start to become self-righteous even. And we start to believe ourselves to, I don't want to say know-it-alls, but to be an authority in deciding what's best and what's good for those who they're leading. And I think a lot of leaders, and I've seen a lot of leaders, start to make that mistake and they stop listening to those they are serving and start listening to themselves. And again, as we talked in one of our past discussions, as a servant leader, we have to maintain the ability to listen. And the reason why I don't know if you can separate the two, ethics and servitude, is because your ethics will keep you in a position of servitude if that's where you're coming from as a leader, if that's what you're supposed to do as a leader. There's a individual I know that's in a position as an administrator in a hospital whose job is to increase not just productivity, but increase the school status, promote the school status, or what they call magnet status in our hospital. And she has to do a lot of things. She has to make sure the patient's experience increases as well as the employee experiences increase. And she's not there as a servant. Absolutely not. In fact, the only entity she's serving really is the hospital. But when it comes to her employees, she's definitely not coming from a position of servitude because she has to do what's necessary to improve the experiences of all those involved, employees and patients, while increasing and improving the status of the hospital. So in this respect, coming from a position of different leadership, authoritarian leadership, she's actually in a position to really be more authoritative in her leadership. Yet she has to improve morale with her employees, and that's where the big challenge comes in, because she has to make a lot of decisions that the employees are not going to be happy with, but yet at the same time they will benefit. They will be recipients and they will benefit from her decisions. Now, if she's still serving them, it may serve the employees uh, for her to do what she's supposed to do to improve things, but she definitely can't approach them from the position of servitude, else she probably will not be successful in her task. And I bring that out because ethics still come into play where she is concerned, but her ethics are really just professional ethics, and that's about it. It's not necessarily a moral ethic in this play, whereas I believe servitude is more of a moral ethical implication. So her ethics are dictated by professionalism, and I compare the two because I do understand the contrast, the comparison between ethical leadership and servitude leadership, but I believe in that kind of contrast. They might be symbiotic, whereas in other areas of leadership, I don't think necessarily ethics is a symbiosis, although ethics still is important in any form of leadership. In fact, ethics and integrity, I believe, go together and should always be present in any situation, leadership or not. If I may interject a thought, and I believe in a situation where there can be a lot of contrast is where ethics and law is concerned, because there are a lot of laws that I believe violates ethical or dictates non-ethical behavior, and I believe in our society in so many ways, and we've seen in recent news and tragedies that have occurred recently, where there are definitely conflicts between laws and ethics. I don't mean to run on. I realize I don't want to take up too much space, but
Actually, that's very good, because you're actually leading into the next question that we are going to address, and that question is, and so think about it, and we will continue it. So the question is practicing servant leadership an ethical exercise in itself? My thinking is that, and actually, Armand brought a good point, the moral issues. Leadership is not an amoral phenomenon. Leadership is a process of influencing other people. It has a moral dimension that distinguishes it from other types of influence, such as coercion or despotic control. So ethical reasoning and decision making, they both address moral issues. Ethical reasoning and decision making depends on the moral principles that govern a person's behavior and define right and wrong. Generally speaking, there are three approaches to ethical reasoning, and these approaches divide into two domains that I mentioned earlier in the earlier second round, namely guidelines to conduct and guidelines to the character. Ethical models offer a way of talking about the character and conduct of leadership in something other than esoteric terms. Ethical models are attempts to explain in simple terms the complex dynamic of human behavior, and thus help in decision making. And there are two problems with these ethical models. One is an inability to show and define the basis for an opinion or a decision typically results in blind spots stemming from aspects of a decision or a situation rooted in the leader's unconscious frame of reference. And blind spots contribute to poor decisions, and it is those poor decisions that set up inconsistent and toxic behaviors by the leaders. And the other one is the inability to show and define the basis for an opinion or a decision, making it non-reproducible. What I mean by that is that how do new leaders assess the situation to arrive at an outcome that's consistent to their beliefs and the greatest good? That's what Charles was referring to earlier. If a leader cannot train other people, their own followers, in how to think, then they will not develop leaders. They will develop super followers who do what they are told and nothing more. Leaders must have an ability to manage complexity in decision making and in analysis. And so the need for ethical reasoning is clearly evident. And for servant leaders, the ethical decision making process always results in reflection about the outcomes of decisions and behaviors, as well as the process that generates the decisions and the behaviors in the first place. And the outcomes of any particular decision or behavior either confirm and or challenge our mental models. And therefore, the feedback is extremely important. And feedback, when I say feedback, whether positive or negative, is the essence of a learning process that sees the outcomes of the decisions in an exercise of internal reflection. The reflection considers how the servant leader made a decision in the first place and the degree to which it is consistent to one's ethical commitments and the degree to which their conduct and character form their ethical commitments. And so feedback is important to recognize because it represents the cultural, familial, and organizational norms. So from that perspective, how do we see this question? How does one exercise ethics while practicing servant leadership from a point of view of conduct and character that forming one's ethical commitments? So, who would go first?
Well, I'd like to listen because it's exactly the dilemma that I was thinking of as we were started, and we've kind of been augmenting it and circling around, giving a lot of good ideas. But I'd like to hear from some of you if you've had a little bit more experience in that arena, so that I could help figure out how to work on it in my business and with other people that I work with to make improved decisions and improved outcomes.
Okay.
Well, actually, I'm sorry.
Go ahead, Armand.
Excuse me, sure. Actually, I've been in that situation a few times, and I am an academic program director, and I've worked in several schools, and there were 3 schools that I worked in with my immediate superior, and we had a very serious problem because of ethical issues. Management, usually they say whenever there's a problem in a company, management is usually the first to go and usually higher up management. This last situation I was in, one of my subordinates class was complaining about certain issues, and my immediate supervisor believed that the teacher encouraged the students to complain. When I investigated the situation, I learned that it was not the instructor, but it was the students. They are adults, so they're more than capable of understanding what's going on and what they were missing, and so they complained. She believed it was the instructor in spite of what I said, and she wanted to terminate the instructor, and I strongly disagreed with her to the point where we no longer got along. And that was a problem for a while, but my ethics wouldn't allow me to do anything else. Another superior I worked with at one time, she and I never really got into words too much, but it was her, and then there were two managers, myself and another individual, and then there were some supervisors under us. And she always explained that she would share some things with us since we were managers that she wouldn't share with the other supervisors. And whenever she would take a break, we would take a break together and we would discuss things and issues, and that wasn't a problem. But when I realized that the discussions started turning into gossip, and she wasn't just talking about issues, but she was actually really just gossiping, then I started joining them in their breaks because I didn't believe that that was right. And it wound up developing into tensions between she and I because I realized she probably realized that I pulled away. And we started disagreeing on a few things. And the majority of the disagreements was really how she would deal with things. She would talk about people, and I didn't agree with that. Even though she was talking to us, and we're managers, I still didn't believe that that was correct. Nobody else may not have been hearing, but that's not what we're supposed to be about. We're not supposed to talk bad about them. We're not supposed to do that. Let's discuss the issue that you may have disagreed with. You can even ask our opinion, but don't talk bad about the individual. To me, that was an ethical issue.
Yeah.
Nobody was around to know, but that was purely an ethical issue that I couldn't partake in. I was still there. Eventually, she wound up leaving, but that was a situation that it grew, and again, it was a issue of ethics, if you will. I remember this one individual worked with him in a short period of time, but I give him a lot of credit because he started off with a couple of us, a team of program directors, but he had credentials and experience that superseded the positions we were in. And in a short time, he became president of one of the company's school campuses. And at a convention for school presidents, before a convention of school presidents, one of the corporate heads, executives, was letting him know that they wanted to fire his director of education for whatever reason. He disagreed with them to the point where he did not allow them to fire him. So when he did attend the convention a few weeks later, they sent people from the corporate office over to his campus, and they fired his director of education without him knowing. He was still at the convention when he heard about the termination, and in the middle of the convention, he quit, and he left the company because he didn't like what they did. I hold so much respect for that individual because that is true, not just ethics, but character. And I say that again because our ethics and our character will take us many different places, depending on the situation. And his led to unemployment, voluntary unemployment, but it didn't matter because that's how strong his ethics and his character was. Evidently, he felt they were blaming him for something that was not his fault, and he stood behind them. And fortunately, as much as I've come in contact with some bad leaders with poor ethics, I've come in contact with some good leaders and strong ethics. And the one thing about having ethics as a leader is it'll put us in a situation where we are challenged. Do we follow our ethics, or do we follow our ethics and put us in a situation where our jobs are in jeopardy, or do we forsake our ethics to maintain that security? And unfortunately, I think we can all agree that we've seen many that would sacrifice their integrity and their ethics just to make sure that they keep their employment secure. So it is a very strong issue that many have to contend with, and it is a real choice. I know you had mentioned, if I may, a little quickly, when you talked about morals and how do we practice ethics and be consistent with our moral beliefs. And I think how you do that is when you understand the two. And that is, I believe, ethics are really behaviors that are accepted and agreed upon according to the common understanding of those within a society. I believe, though, that morals come from a stronger place, usually a person's spiritual convictions. And with that, I believe sometimes morals and ethics can clash. So how do you choose what are ethics, what is ethical, what is moral? Then I have to say, ethical behavior then may just have to change according to the morals and beliefs at that time or the given individual. And I think law is a perfect example because you have the case of confidentiality and unethical behavior of lawyers divulging confidential information, or even in medicine, same thing, all information is confidential and it's unethical to divulge otherwise. But then if you have a situation where you are aware of an impending crime or something that can occur, do you break the ethical code and do you share that information? And these are dilemmas that a lot of medical and legal professionals and many other professionals are faced with, even in law enforcement or the military. It's the code and ethics to always support each other, but to what extent?
Okay. Charles?
Hello. Yep.
Yeah, go ahead, Charles.
Oh yeah. Okay. So yeah, I was not sure if Armand finished. That's I think Armand, you touched on a lot of different things, personal values versus the organizational values or ethics, right? So I think we kind of talked about in the earlier segment also. I think I think
Yes.
this is an important point. I think we talked about. I think that's what I think Armand was alluding, right?
Yes.
Conflict or dilemma between personal morals, beliefs, and values versus organizational beliefs, values, and ethics. And there's a conflict. There's always a challenge. I think the point I was talking about earlier was I think this is the timing thing. When you're joining your organization, I think that's the first thing I think I've seen. I think that's a good point. I think Jack Wolf's point is critical because you got to see your personal values and morals and beliefs that align with organizational values and beliefs and ethics, right? If that is the acid test, once you pass it, and again, there's no 100%, right? And after that, then I think if there's an alignment, it's great, but there's a smaller misalignment, you can always kind of take a note of it. The better way, in my mind, to handle those situations is, and then once, even though I think if there's 80, 90% match, there are some few areas where there may be an issue, but then you can go ahead and continue as part of an organization. Maybe another acid test we can kind of work around the situation is when you believe, there is a situation, again, the leadership is situational. There is a situation you got to make a decision compromising your values against organizational values. The general guiding principle, having joined the company and the organization, always the overarching principle is organizational values, beliefs overrides your personal beliefs and values. I think that's a given. At the same time, in case if there's a conflict at the same time, this is what I'm saying, maybe there's a situationally certain situation, if you believe it is going to contradict your values, you can always excuse yourself from that situation because most organizations are mature enough to give you that exception so that you can excuse out of the situation so that you don't have to be forcefully, voluntarily putting yourself in a situation that you be compromising. So I think that's another kind of a situational leadership tactics that one can then adopt to overcome some of those conflicting scenarios. So having said that scenario, maybe I just want to throw down another one is I think you need to kind of look at it from the larger framework standpoint, this dilemma, right? So for example, what is that? I think how do you overcome the senior leaders? How do you overcome? How do you kind of make sure these dilemmas doesn't happen always, right? So the best thing is it's not only just leadership but also the culture. Remember, in the past we've seen in some of the discussions, you've seen leadership and culture are the two sides of the enabler coin. Mm-hmm. In other words, when culture is not conducive enough to do something, leadership has to put a lot more energy. And when culture is supporting, it's kind of the bouncing ball, right? When culture is a lot more conducive, leaders have the easy ride. So in other words, I think, for example, so those are the audiences are, I think maybe, Surya, Armand, and Lynn, I think you've seen some of the writings, we always see, leadership, strategy, or innovation, they all stem from a purpose seed. I think consciously, when we chose that purpose seed, we made it as a five-part component. We kind of called it vision, mission, and BHAC, which is goals, big, hairy, and audacious goal, and then we said values plus goals. So when that seed starts growing into an organizational, they become invisible instructions within the organizational culture. Again, we talked about in the past, culture is basically interactions and interventions, unwritten laws, rules, which guides the way things get done within an organization. So in other words, when the organizational values get ingrained within the organization, when leaders do not have to put a lot more energy to enforce ethics. So it comes naturally, right? So again, only thing is the big leaders have to, in those cases, only handle the anomalies. Because in most cases, when the purpose seed has grown correctly into the organization, then the leadership decision making time, they got to handle only the exceptions and anomalies, and then by nature, by flow, everything will flow smoothly. But in cases where the culture is toxic, that's where I think all the dilemmas will come in, all the situations, conflict, and all of that. Then leadership has to raise the bar, and they have to put a lot more energies to handle this ethical leadership and servant leadership and all of that. The point again saying is, I think in a way, the culture part is more of a proactive leadership, whereas leadership part is more of a situational leadership in a this context. So the point again is, I think this is where the senior leaders have to put a lot more energy in ensuring the culture part is set outlined correctly and that it is grown from the purpose seed correctly. So this is a lot of times, when they talk about what, this, when you talk about vision, mission, values, and codes, they say those are the things that sit in the shelf, right? A lot of companies, when you go into the mid-level management, that's why sometimes you hear the statement, oh my gosh, here comes the value guys, right? Here comes the, the vision, mission kind of guys, right? So the reason is, because a lot of people are not able to connect the linkage from the big picture vision, mission, and the values and the codes of the ethical codes of an organization back to their day-to-day decision making. That's the problem within most organizations, because they are not able to create a causal correlation linkage from the big picture vision, mission, values code back to their day-to-day strategies, the project and decision they're making in the day-to-day. Mm-hmm. So that is the leadership failure from a senior leadership standpoint, because these senior leaders have not done that. The middle management, they miss the link. So when they are faced with the situation, they don't have anything to derive their strength from. So then they compromise, the dilemmas come in, and then finally, then some senior leaders will catch it, then they, my gosh, in hindsight, they'll come back and say, all the things look good in paper, but then those kind of values and codes do not reflect in the day-to-day decision making. So it's kind of both a leadership challenge and also cultural challenge. Again, this is a kind of a topic on its own. We can talk about leadership and culture, but the takeaway I would say is, when the culture is not conducive, then leadership has to raise the bar. When the culture is conducive, leaders have an easy ride. I think that's one thing most leaders will agree. But the point again is, the takeaway I would say is, in the critical, always the crisis situations, leaders have to release extra energy to handle the situation. And in a smooth type of a situation, leaders have to put their energy in shaping the culture so that they can proactively create the field. And then so that, the seeds will grow into the right type of tree, and the navigation becomes easy, decision making becomes easy, and all is aligned with the culture and the context and character. It all will be, people will be releasing the right type of energy, the heart defines with energy, and the decisions will be made with the both with the means and end, and then the ended kind of style leaders will exhibit the leadership style in the organization. Again, we can go on and on. Hopefully, that kind of answers, I think, Surya, to your point about the practicing part, right? Again, there's a lot more. We can go a little more in detail. Hopefully, that kind of answers some of the things that Armand is talking about. Maybe I'll let Armand and Lynn to chime in, and then we can go into the closing section.
Yeah. Armand, would you like to add anything? Or otherwise, we'll summarize and then go with one final comments.
I really like and agree with what Charles said. For sake of not taking up too much time, because I'm looking at the time and I want to throw, and I don't want to say too much. Um, I think it's, and I think it's ongoing. They're going to. I think we have to continue to reevaluate our ethics, and every situation is different as well too. So I think it's a constant, not even just a time period situation or challenge, but I think it can be a momentary challenge where every situation you're in, you're going to have to evaluate and determine uh, what is ethical, what is appropriate, what is correct, what is right, and go from there.
Okay. Yeah, excellent. So, yeah, it's been a very enlightening discussion so far. So let me summarize what I heard so far tonight. Um, Leadership must first and foremost meet the needs of other people, and that idea has led to become what we now know as servant leadership. Placing an emphasis on partnerships and collaboration, its main objective is to build a unique trust between a leader and their team. And servant leadership takes a strong stance on ethical behavior and moral values in order to display a leader who aspires to serve better for other people rather than to seek power and authority. And the servant leaders place service before self-interest. Servant leaders listen first to express confidence in other people. Servant leaders inspire trust by being trustworthy. Servant leaders focus on what is feasible to accomplish, and they lend a hand and provide the tools necessary. Making moral and effective judgments based on a process of ethical decision making is unavoidable in leadership. But more ethical decision making provides a means for early intervention to forestall either personal or organizational disaster. Ethical decision making is a process of responsible action based on explicit moral imperatives and values, requiring that servant leaders be capable of explicitly defining the basis of their ethical reasoning. The idea of knowing that a leader is working for the right reasons shows the team members that they can work together to reach a shared objective and can place trust in their leader. Because trust provides the foundation for people to follow their leaders with confidence and with enthusiasm. From gaining trust, people will have the confidence that their leader is honest and always sets out to achieve uh, communicated goals. Leadership in any context is about more than achieving performance targets. Successful leadership is about achieving them through ethical and socially responsible means that enhance and develop all of the people involved. And ethics require leaders to act in a way that is of their personal beliefs and society's values as a whole. Having respect for others plays a huge role in servant leadership, and of course, also many other leadership styles that we discussed today. Sometimes leaders must make decisions based on their heart, even if it means putting money or profits in the second place. And so, ideas of what ethical behavior actually is something that varies from person to person and from community to community. Personal opinions of ethics are determined by people's values that are developed through their lifetime. Values are a person's own beliefs which provide a guide for their behavior and ambitions. A leader who displays an ethical and moralistic nature in regards to who they are dealing with will be a successful leader. Uh, some may define the scope of success as the monetary results, although a leader who works for the benefit of other people and their team members will prove to find happiness in all fields among us all. And so we have just about 10 minutes left. So would you like to add anything else that you did not find the context to say in this discussion? Or just a few closing words from each of you before we conclude this session? Lynn?
I'm glad you you giving us time to do that, because in your summation I remembered something else. There's sometimes where actually you have to do the unethical thing because it's the right thing to do. And I remember this situation because you said, I think your comment was in part of your summation that you have to do what you think is right. Mm-hmm. And when I first started teaching years ago, I remember there was my supervisor. She became my supervisor. She had a student who was failing poorly. She was really doing bad, and the student had such a low self-esteem, and the teacher was aware of this, and the teacher believed that the self-esteem needed to be addressed in order for the student to start to do well. Mm-hmm. Well, the student continued, took an exam, and she failed terribly. It wasn't even a 60-something, it was a low failing grade. Mm-hmm. So what the teacher did was the teacher passed her anyway, which of course is unethical, and it's really even illegal because it was fraud. But the teacher passed the student. The student, when she saw her grade, she was so excited. She jumped for joy, hugged the teacher, and she was all up in arms, just ready to celebrate. Mm-hmm. And she started to feel good about herself. The next exam she actually got a very high 60, a huge improvement from what she was normally doing. After that exam, the teacher still passed her. Even though she felt she still passed her. After that second time, the student never failed another test. Mm. And it's because, of course, she started to feel good about herself. And why I bring that up is because what the teacher did was unethical. Mm-hmm. But when you look at the bigger picture, it was the right thing to do. Mm. And I say that, I'm sorry? I say that.
No, go ahead, Armand.
Oh, okay. Thank you. I say that because, and again, thinking about all of what you were saying and summarizing, it really is a challenge because, again, I guess that's a situation where the ethical thing in a larger scheme, in a bigger picture, was the ethical thing really the right thing to do? Mm-hmm. And in that case, I can't say that it was the right thing to do. I don't mean that the ends justify the means, but in the same way, the student went on and continued doing very well, B's and A's, and eventually graduated. So it goes back to, on a case-by-case basis, we really are challenged. I think what is really challenged are our ethics, our morals, depending on the situation, even the law. So it's a challenge. One of you, I'm not sure if it was Charles or you, Surya, but we talk about having good judgment. It's a key quality, a key skill that leaders must have. Mm-hmm. And what choice are you going to make? What is your judgment on a case-by-case or situation-by-situation basis? So I think that can be my summary.
Okay, excellent.
Armand, I was the one that kind of briefly interrupted there. I thought you were at a stopping point, but I don't think that was unethical. I think that her job was to teach, and to help the student become the best person and to have the best outcome they can. And I think that qualifies in the umbrella of learning, and that wouldn't be unethical. It could be unethical if you looked at it just strictly from the grade point of view and blah, blah, blah. You know what I'm saying? And okay, you were off by a tenth of a point until you fail. And by giving you that, how shall I say, latitude, you all of a sudden become a major person. I mean, look at Bill Gates. They're all over the place, you know. And so I don't really feel that was unethical. I feel that would have been more of a, how shall I say it, a little bit of positive feedback. It just kind of a gut feeling that, gosh, if she got a little encouragement, maybe she would shine, and the teacher was right. And I don't think that would be considered unethical. So that was my point. That's all.
Yeah. So to add, I think since both Armand and Lynn signed in on that story, maybe yours my 2 cents, right? So the question is, this is one of those things, right? The performance versus potential, right? So see, this is something, you know, Armand, as you talked about, you know, from a school situation, right? So this happens all the time in corporate America, right? So when people try to grade people like in the World Cup, right? See, the performance, sometimes it's depending upon the person's perception, right? So, you know, I'm sure in most companies, you know, it gets done by the being of 2 managers, right? So again, you know, depending upon it's 2 or 3 people decide, you know, that's where the person gets plotted as a performance in the World Cup. Although I'm not saying this happens in all the companies. In some companies, that's enough, right? So the point again is, I think this is where leaders have to evaluate. I think to your point, I think also Lynn's point, it's not in ethical, you know, and I agree with that. It's because it's not only based on the performances, sometimes could be misled based on the perception of the people, because they could be misled. That's where the potential part comes in. I think that's where, I think, to your point, Armand, I think that immediately they went ahead and cast him, and then obviously his potential started manifesting. So I think, in other words, I think leadership is all about not just the perception based on some 1 or 2 people's opinion. You got to balance the potential, and then the potential itself will start manifesting its performance. Another metaphor, I think, just within the context, I'll just take a minute to throw it out here, is I think this is the larger argument people talk about, the law versus grace. So, you know, if you look at when you always derive some inspiration from scripture, so, you know, when the law comes back and constrain people, right, no matter however you try, nobody can fulfill all their laws. You'll always fall short. See, that's where I think when you come back in grace, what it does is it passes you, puts you on the top. And then not only it puts you on the top, but also it gives you a bouncer. When you fall, it bounces you back. So that gives you a lot more motivation for you to raise the bar. So when the grace comes and puts you on the top, you try to go 1 notch above, you from glory to glory. So in other words, this is kind of a little bit of theology I'm talking about. So it changes the perception of the people. So now it doesn't make you feel guilty. What it does is, you know what, I've already put you on the top. Now it is up to you to stay on the top or go above. And then when you fall, I've given you a bouncer to bounce you back. So that's the same point, I think, with businesses. That kind of a mindset, what it does is it helps the students or our citizens, anybody. It helps us to perform and raises the bar, and then the sky is the limit. So the point again, it's always situational, right? I'm not saying that, but in this context, I think this type of a mindset helps you because it motivates you, it helps you to raise the bar, and then it, you know, brings the best of the potential out of you. So which kind of goes back to the last point we talked about. Again, we talked about from a larger framework. This is a servant leadership from ethical leadership. We always thought servant leadership is more of the amount of people capable of releasing the potential part, whereas the ethical part is the energy they release more of a performance part. Again, so maybe just a good segue to summarize. I think as a closing remark, I think, you know, you talked ethical leadership and civil leadership in my mind as 2 sides of the same coin, very much like performance and potential. So there's always, you got to balance it. And then within the context of the larger framework, I think, you know, when we look at it, I think the way I'm gonna kind of trying to summarize it here is it is always situational. But then when a situation comes in, you know, once you are capable of releasing a lot more heartbeat energies and mindset energies, and heartbeat energies gives us more ethics or authenticity or integrity, opposite energy is more of accountability or contact, I think all the things we talked about. Once you always raise the bar, there's no way you can go wrong in your ethics. So I think the takeaway here is, always you got to perform in your maximum potential, strive for the best, being a lifelong learner, learn to go from glory to glory, raise the bar from every iteration. That way, there's no way we can fall short. But again, there is always there will be some situation where there will be some conflict and dilemmas. But those comes in, obviously having got to the acid test is, if you're joining the beginning of the organization, always try to align your personal values with the organizational values. And then, having made the decision, if there is a situation which comes still there's a conflict, I think the best way to do is excuse yourself out of the situation, so that most organizations are mature enough to excuse yourself so that you don't have to be part of the decision. But then, even if you choose to be part of it, then the final takeaway is basically organizational values override your personal values, because that's the kind of the way you look at it. At the end of the day, we are all kind of organizations that are here to make money, and they're aligned with the thing because larger public interest overrides the personal interest. Hopefully that will kind of resonate with our audience. Again, this is a larger topic again, so I think I'll let Priya to kind of summarize again. Hopefully that will be my last word.
Yeah, that's beautiful, Charles.
Very good word, Charles.
we have we have
Thank you,
just
Charles
under
and Armand.
we have just
Thank
under
you.
1 minute.
It was a very cordial situation. We all learned from each other. I'm glad, I think. It's very good. Yeah.
Yeah, we have.
Thanks, Surya.
Yeah.
For always, you do a great job in facilitating this. Hopefully, it's the beginning of the first show in our year. Again, Happy New Year to all of our audiences. And we all learn from each other.
Yeah.
That's the good thing about this.
Yeah, we just have, I just have less than 60 seconds. So, Charles, Lynn, Armand, thank you very much for sharing your wisdom and experience. You all made this discussion very informative, and I'm sure our audiences find your broad and diverse viewpoints empowering and enlightening. And I hope to see all of you next month again on the third Saturday of February for another roundtable discussion. I would like to thank all of our listeners for their patience with us tonight in listening to this discussion. And I also hope that whether you are listening to this live broadcast or the recorded audio, have heard something that resonated well with you, or even know somebody in your life who would benefit from this discussion. If so, I would encourage you to share this discussion with them and ask them to get in touch with us if we could be of further assistance to them. I hope you heard something useful while listening to this roundtable discussion, as much as I have enjoyed hosting it tonight. Please tune in every third Saturday of the month at 8 p.m. Chicago time as we discuss other topics in a roundtable format. Also, remember that Quantum Leap Radio broadcasts on a variety of topics every Saturday based on the principles of quantum physics and wisdom of beliefs. See you next time. Namaste.
Namaste.
Bye.